So we're back here now for the last panel of the day, and we've saved until last an issue that's hugely important. I think it's been shown by the number of times that it's been brought up in the other sessions that we've had throughout the last couple of days, and that's the issue of space traffic management. So we've got a panel who are going to be now discussing this in a lot more depth. Before I pass over to Leah, our moderator, just to remind everyone, immediately following this, we're going to be announcing the winners of the two awards we've got going, the Innovation in Space Award and the Sustainability in Space Award. So if you haven't yet voted in those categories, there's your last chance to do so now, so please do vote in those. And as I said, we'll be announcing those immediately after this panel. But for now, as I said, we're going to be looking at space traffic management. So to explain more and introduce our panelists, I'd like to pass over to Leah Pavlovich from APCO, who's going to be our moderator. Leah, over to you.
Thank you. I hope you can all hear me well. Okay, great. I see nodding. So last but certainly not least, one of the most interesting topics, not just here in the EU bubble, but for a long time, certainly outside of Brussels as well. Very excited to have such a great panel of industry representatives, policymakers, and national representatives as well. And I'm looking forward to a very fun debate. So not everyone thinks that STM is the biggest issue, but I think our panelists will here highlight why we need to care about it and what we can do. As you all know, a number of satellites and debris is constantly increasing in outer space, and that's due to reusable launchers, small sats, and more private investment in the space sector. But that now means that there's more than a million debris items larger than 1 centimeter orbiting around Earth, and that is growing. It's putting our satellites and assets at a risk that we haven't seen before, and we need to better understand not just how to mitigate, but also manage that while continuing to grow capabilities that we have globally in space. In response to this, specifically, the Commission is rolling out an STM initiative with the aim of delivering sustainable, safe, and secure space ecosystem to both European and global players. But as I said, the EU is not just the only actor, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. So I'm going to just very quickly introduce our panelists, and then each of them has 5 minutes to talk a little bit about what they're doing and their companies and or initiatives, and then after that we'll have a few questions lined up and then hand over to audience. So first we have Mr. Christoph Kautz here to my right, Head of Unit for Secure Connectivity, Space Surveillance and Applications at DG DEFIS in the European Commission. Then we have Mr. Marc Serres, CEO of the Luxembourg Space Agency. After that, Mr. Miguel Angel Molina Cobos, Deputy General Manager at GMV. Long name, but I hope I said it right, that we're good. Mr. Carlos Sequeira, Business Development Manager at Neurospace, and then Kumar Singaraja, Business Director of Government and Regulatory Affairs, UK and Europe at Astroscale. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Kautz for his first opening remarks.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. What I wanted to do in this brief introduction, giving you perhaps a little bit an overview of what we have been doing since publishing this communication in mid-February, because by now I think everybody has heard, seen, perhaps even read the communication. But since February, a series of things have happened, have been implemented. So first of all, at the political level, I think it's important to say that the Council, the Competitiveness Council to be more precise, they issued in June Council conclusions on our communication, and I have to say that they are very positive. I reread them this morning before coming to this conference, and I think really it's very positive and very supportive to what we have proposed. You will remember that in the communication we had these 4 what we called avenues. So one was on working on civil and military requirements. The second one was working on improving the capabilities. The third one was working on standardization and the regulatory area. And the fourth one was working on at the international level. So if I start with the first one, civil military requirements, we are about to set up as we have announced in the communication, a group, a forum. In Commission terms, it's called an expert group, which will be as wide as possible, and to work with stakeholders to establish these requirements. Now, the interesting thing, which we didn't know either when we started to do this, that this will be the first expert group jointly set up by the Commission and EAS. That had never existed, an expert group set up jointly by Commission and EAS. So I think this really shows you that we will want to be comprehensive and inclusive. Then on the second one, which is the capabilities. So there we have on the one hand been working on enlarging the EUSST consortium. You know that we have a consortium of 7 member states, and it's foreseen to enlarge this to an EUSST partnership. The name changes, but not only the name changes, there will be also many more member states participating. And so since February, we have first done an implementing act which describes how member states have to apply for this partnership, what criteria they have to fulfill. And thereafter, we got 15 member states who grouped together and who submitted an application to form a partnership. And just 3 weeks ago, the Commission took a decision which essentially says, yes, these 15 member states, they fulfill the requirement to set up a partnership, and now these 15 member states are in the process of signing the partnership. It's quite important because it means that we will go from the capabilities of 7 member states to the capabilities of 15 member states, meaning we will have more sensors available, more radars available. So it's quite important in terms of improving our capabilities. And second, we said in the communication that we want to have a better connection with industry and startups in particular, and that we want to find ways to better involve them in what we are doing. And so we said in the communication that we will set up a forum with stakeholders. And so we have in the meantime set up a European industry startup forum and on SST. And they have met once in April. They will meet again in November. And so the aim is, if you want to see what capabilities, what technologies are out there, and how can the future EUSST partnership profit from them. So also progress on this. Then the area of standardization and regulation. So on standards, we have also been doing a few things. Most notably, we have launched a standardization, or yes, a call. We have launched a call to CEN and CENELEC to work on a standard, on a possible standard on rules of the road, which at some point we might bring forward at ISO. And on ISO, also the Commission is in the meantime an observer to the relevant ISO technical committee dealing with STM. It's, I think, Technical Committee 20. So we are an observer there because we said in the communication we want to be more proactive on standards. So also here we have been advancing. Now, of course, the thing that probably interests most of you, what about legislation? So on legislation, we have said in the communication that we want to work also the route of regulatory measures. And there was just perhaps 2 weeks ago, there was a debate in the European Parliament. So there was an oral question on STM by the Parliament, and then the Commission took the floor, and we clearly said in this intervention, yes, we will work on legislation, and so we are at the moment looking at if we go down this route. I mean, there are 2 major questions that need to be answered and which we're analyzing at the moment is, first of all, what legal basis to choose, because there are several legal bases possible in the treaty. And second, what is the scope? And of course, the one is linked to the other. Depending on the scope, you might need a different or several legal bases. Finally, and then with that I finish because I'm already probably talking too long. On the international side, there we have said several things, but we have in particular said that we want to work together with our partners, like-minded partners on STM. And for example, we have had a space dialogue with the US where we have specifically agreed on working with them very closely on STM, and we will try to do the same with other partners, like-minded partners. And finally, we are also studying in more detail what we have announced in the communication, that the EU should see how it can participate in the various treaties, space treaties. So this we are analyzing also from the legal point of view. Voila, I stop at that.
Thank you. So that's quite a bit of work coming out of the Commission here on this, and we can expect to see a lot more. Thank you also for the insight on the conclusions this morning. And maybe turning over then to Mark and what is happening in Luxembourg.
Thank you, Leah. Yes, so I'm the CEO of the Luxembourg Space Agency. In Luxembourg, the Space Agency has a role that is slightly different from, let's say, more traditional agencies. Our main role is to support the government of Luxembourg in diversifying its economy. And through the history of Luxembourg, it has been depending on several sectors, and you certainly know Luxembourg today as a financial services platform, and this is a big part of the economy. And so over the last decades, Luxembourg always tried to identify other sectors that could, of course, support this diversification. And space is one of these sectors. This is already a story that goes back to the 80s, so we are not new in this domain, but still maybe we were not known enough about, let's say, the high priority the government has given to the development of this sector. So we have been delegated this work by the Ministry of the Economy. And so I would say the first thing we have to do is to support economic growth of our companies in the country. And so we are doing a lot of work to support them from different perspectives. And more generally, I think what we try now to do is really to expand this ecosystem. And this requires action on various dimensions: regulatory, on R&D, innovation, access to financing, international cooperation, talent development. So there are many aspects on which the agency is acting here, really to support the development of this sector. So this is a little bit the history, if I can say, because for the moment we are in the very last rounds of elaborating a new strategy, and we are now on the point to submit it to our Council of Ministers to adopt it now in the next few weeks. And you will not be surprised, of course, to learn that our strategy will also put sustainability at the heart of what we want to do. So, and I consider, of course, here this topic of space traffic management of one of the aspects that we should consider in the broader sense of sustainability. I think, as you introduced, Leah, we are now confronted with a situation that is more and more complicated to manage. And I have read somewhere that we are not yet in a crisis mode for the debris, but we are not far from entering in this mode. So there is certainly something to do, and we as Luxembourg, we want to be part of this movement. I think we have contributed actively also to the work that has been done in the EU framework, and supported, of course, here the work of the Commission. And Christophe, I hope that you have no doubt that you have the support of the member states. And so here, this is becoming an important topic. And this is something that we will be able to talk a little bit more in details when, of course, it will be approved by our government. But of course, it's important for us also because we have this ambition to develop this economic ecosystem in Luxembourg. It's not only from the perspective of, let's say, the government or the regulator that we look into it, but also from the perspective of growing the economy. And there, of course, there is a certain balance that we will need to find. And I'm sure we'll come back on these aspects also in the discussion. But this is definitely also a topic that is of high interest for Luxembourg.
All right, thank you. Wow, we're looking forward to that approval and to read a little bit more about it. And as you said, we're not yet in crisis. I was speaking to a few people outside of this panel in general, and non-industry players are saying, oh gosh, what if the world turns into WALL-E with 1,000 pieces of debris and everyone has to deal with everything in outer space? But maybe to shed a little bit of light of how far we are from WALL-E, but how careful we have to be, is Miguel from GMV.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to the panel. I will continue with this aspect. I think it's relevant. We are facing a real problem, and I don't know if we are really sensible what we are talking about. Today we have around 30,000 objects around us which are dangerous. Dangerous means that if they crash with an existing operational mission, we miss the mission. And we are talking about flying operational satellite. We can be around 6,000, but this is increasing a lot because of Starlink and other constellation that in the process. Then we are talking about numbers which are really relevant. And we are close to miss operational satellite, which is cost, which is it's really sensitive for the operators. Then to try to understand a little bit this, we compare this like a pandemic. You know very well what is a pandemic because I will live in one. And here in a pandemic, we have three main aspects that we need to control: prevention, follow-up and analysis, and treatment and cure. Prevention is connected to rules, to standards, to aspects related to recommendation that we need to apply to avoid the problem in the future. This is something on which this is our objective today, to try to analyze where we are on this. In the area of connected to the follow-up and the analysis is what we are doing today in Europe. This is EUST SST program. Is the system that is today doing the analysis, the follow-up, the identification of the objects which are dangerous, the connection of these objects with the global database, and then the services that we provide later using this information to the different operators. And finally, for the treatment and cure, we need to remove the debris. And how to do it? Well, there is only one way. Let's go take it and go to the atmosphere to destroy it. Then probably Kumar will say something about this later on. Then in all these aspects, we need to progress, and we are not yet in the level that we would like to be. What we have been doing at GMV to help on this progression? Well, we started our activities in the 90s with ESA developing the original database for space debris. It was called DISCOS. Something quite old. The problem is not today. That appeared a long time ago. And we were responsible for the development of these activities. It was our initial activities in this area. Later on, we have been really active in the ESA program connected to SSA. By this time, SSA was connected to SST, space weather, plus NEO, the Near Earth Object. And on this, we have been particularly active with more than 30 projects, I remember well, in which we lead in activities to develop technology that we needed to solve or to identify or to help in this problem connected to the debris. Right after this, the European Commission take the lead with this SST project, SST program, with 5 countries at the beginning developing the activity, then later 4, then later 6, 7, and today going to 15. This is the last number we are looking for. On this original activity, Spain was one of the countries deeply involved, and then from GMV was participating in the project, and we have been the responsible for the operation center, the design, development, and operation center located in Spain for the activity related to SST. And we are today also responsible for the operation of this center. We are been also contributing to activities in other countries like Germany, France, Romania, Poland, Portugal, to develop also activities related to the SST. And today we are a major player in this area. Of course, we are waiting for the evolutions. We are not yet at the end. We now today have a system which is providing services to many operators and users, but it's not yet fully defined. There are still activities in technology that we need to improve, activities in the service that we need to improve, and we need to increase our portfolio of users. In parallel to this, we have been also involved in commercial activities. We have been developing our own tools and our own capabilities to provide services to the end users, like telecom operators. Then we provide the tools needed to analyze if there is any issue, any warning, any need for a collision avoidance maneuver in case of problems. And also we provide the service, even the service to say how we need to do it, how we apply this in the operational context of these operators. Recently, we finished supporting action study with the Commission, now in this case, really connected to the STM, to provide consultancy activities to define how the future STM should be deployed or should be applied, considering technologies and needs that we need to consider for this. And this has finished recently, and then with a consortium of more than 20 companies in Europe. And now we are working for the future. We have started recently some studies with ESA, with what we call CREAM, which is the eventual computation of the maneuvers, the collision avoidance maneuvers on board. Now we move the responsibility of the ground elements to the satellite directly, which probably will be more efficient in terms of reaction time and capabilities. But it's something that we need to see how this will evolve in the future.
Okay, thank you. Wow, it seems like there's a lot being done in industry, but I know that there are new players that are bringing in some different solutions and new ideas. So maybe, Carlos, you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing in Neurospace?
Sure. Hi, we are Neurospace. We are a space traffic management software company. Our motto is space sustainability. Our strength is artificial intelligence and machine learning, and we have a couple of patents in the making to prove that claim. And our goal is really to help satellite operators to have a better life. As Miguel said, the problem is out there. It's only going to increase. And we have a solution that goes from collision alert to collision avoidance maneuvers that with the simple clicks, the satellite operator can really tackle the problem. Now, imagine that you are a satellite operator. Well, some of the room don't have to imagine. They really are satellite operators. And you receive 200 alerts per day. I mean, it's very much better if the human only has to look in depth into 3 alerts. And Neurospace, we like to think of Neurospace as a kind of a member of the team, right, as a own persona, tackles away the rest of the collision alerts. What about collision alerts maneuvers? Imagine that you are a TV satellite operator. You have to do a collision avoidance maneuver. I don't know, it's a Super Bowl or a championship leagues game, live broadcast. You just don't want to maneuver during that period. So you can upload the calendar of the events, and Neurospace will take that into account and will decide which is the best time or geographical area to perform a maneuver. And with these tools, we can reduce human intervention up to 70%. We were born in 2020. We are now 21 persons, but 2022, and it's not over yet the year, it has been a great year for us. We raised 2.5 million euros in February. We launched our product in July. We already have users on board, and if I open my laptop, I can see the assets and a kind of a color code for the assets. Green, of course, everything is okay. Orange, maybe you don't have to maneuver now, but you just have to keep an eye on the asset. And of course, red, you have to maneuver. And in this September, we just got a project of 25 million euros from the EU Next Gen funding, of course, to help the growth of the company, but also, and this is an important point, to buy a radar infrastructure where we can be able to contribute to something that is crucial, autonomy on data on Europe. So this is a shared infrastructure. Certainly it will be used to make us more competitive, but also for the common good of Europe in this topic. And so 2022 has been a great year for us. And I think, as you guys just said that right now, this is a new market, right? There is no clear leader yet. And we certainly are already a global player, but working hard to become one of the future leaders in this area. Europe certainly needs to have global players in this area, and we are working hard to become one. With GMV, I guess, as well.
Thank you. It's always nice to see how the sector is developing, and as we develop also more solutions, to see players come up. And last but certainly not least, Kumar, I think you wanted to tell us a little bit more in depth on what is actually happening and why we need to care.
Yes, thank you, Leah, and thank you to my fellow panelists for very good introductions. Just a quick word on Astroscale. We're about 300 plus people spread across 4 countries, mainly Japan, UK, US, Israel. The company's raised over $300 million. And our basic mission and vision is to find solutions to help achieve sustainable use of space. I'm not going to talk about the company. I would encourage you to look at the video, which is out there as part of the awards, and please go to our website. Some of us are here. We're happy to answer questions. On the topic of whether we're actually in a crisis mode or not, I'd just like to ask the audience, how many of you actually think space debris is an immediate and it's a crisis problem at this point in time? Those of you who believe that, please put up your hands, and then I'll ask the flip question. And how many of you believe the opposite, that it is not a crisis and we can relax and chill out? Nobody. That's interesting. Okay, so maybe I'm speaking to the converted already, but I thought I'd, in this presentation, just put down some data points, which are some of which are quite recent. So let's see if this works. So some of these stats have already been given by Christoph and colleagues and that. I think the most interesting one is that there's about 1 million small debris objects out there, according to various models from ESA and to some extent from NASA. And in that population, you have things called lethal non-trackable debris, which will probably remain lethal and non-trackable. And then you'll have small debris, which is going to be increasingly trackable up to a point, to some degree of accuracy. And the 18th with Space Fence and Leo Labs probably will get down to about 2-3 centimeters in size. Now, how accurate the ephemeris projection of that will be in the future remains to be seen. So I think everybody knows a very small piece of debris can cause either catastrophic damage or massive damage to a spacecraft or indeed a space station. So just show some data points now. These are 2 trends: large numbers of spacecraft going up, which are satellites, and depending on whose report you believe, up to 40,000, up to 100,000 satellites might be launched by the end of this decade. There is also an increasing number of live manned space stations from private sector and indeed from state actors like China. And one has to be concerned about that as well. This is a recent data sheet which gives an indication of how many, this come from Space Data Alliance, and it's taken some data from a program called Socrates. It basically shows a number of conjunction alerts between 2 space objects which are within 1 kilometer of each other in space. And that number is just shooting up at very fast rates, partly because you have a larger number of LEO satellites in space now. Actually, let me just go back. So next question to the audience. How many of you know about the Kessler effect or the Kessler theory? Okay. Do you believe it is credible? How many of you think it is credible? Okay. So the next slide is actually not our slide. It is a presentation by CNES at the Space Debris Conference in May, which was actually held in Torino because of COVID rules. CNES actually went public, I think, for the first time by a major space agency and said they have observed cascading effects, which is, in other words, the start of the Kessler syndrome in certain orbits. And that is actually around 700 to 900 kilometers. So it has been muttered and said in bars and in restaurants that this thing is happening. It's probably, to my knowledge, the first time a major space agency has said this. So that is around 700 plus kilometers in that range, and there are various reasons for it. Similar things could happen in other orbital altitudes, especially those which are going to be very congested with both LEO spacecraft active and when people start thinking about the effect of small debris in that context. The next one is something again in May. It's actually hidden away at the back of an excellent ESA space report. They did some simulations, which is the first paragraph is an extract from the executive summary, and the second part of the slide is actually from chapter 7, and I've extracted some parts of it. They did some simulations looking ahead as to what is going to be launched, the extent to which people follow current rules or practices, and they did a look ahead prediction as to what is likely to happen. What is really interesting is that if everybody stopped launching anything, sorry, everything now, in other words, no more satellites of any form, no more CubeSats, small sats, large sats into orbit, into LEO, the space debris population will still continue to grow. Okay. So I would say that I think we are actually either already in a crisis or approaching that very, very fast. And the area which I think is a little bit depressing is that the pace of governments who are prepared to take action around the world is too slow. And I'm putting this out provocatively. And relying on, say, the UN and the COPUOS environment to lead to solutions at the international level will be too late. And it is really important for major governments, especially those of spacefaring countries, including those in Europe, to take a leadership position. And hopefully we can discuss what that means in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Ominous message, but a very interesting set of statistics to keep us in mind. But before we go and speak about how we can help mitigate this and solve the problem, one of the things we noted in preparing for this panel is there's no definitive agreed definition of what STM is, and it encompasses so much. So leading by example, I will use the Commission's definition and invite panelists to add and amend and or disagree. So the Commission defines it as STM encompasses the means and the rules to access, conduct activities in, and return from outer space safely, sustainably, and securely. So building on this, and in a few words, please, how would you best define it? Any amendments, qualms, disagreements? Maybe Christoph, you want to start? I mean, I assume you're good with it.
Nothing to add. It's
Fantastic.
perfect.
Then the Commission has foolproofed this. But going on that, does anyone have something they want to say? Carlos, maybe?
I'm a quick jumply with a very short definition. For me, it's first sustainability, so assuring that the Kessler syndrome does never happen. And then it's a safe space to conduct business. So if you don't have space traffic management, then the activities that satellite operators and those who have assets in the site, well, we cannot be conducted. And then the $1 trillion economy that Morgan Stanley famously quoted will just never be there. And I would add something, well, my background is manager, I'm not original from space, and Peter Drucker famously said, if you cannot measure, you cannot manage it. So we need to measure it first in order to manage afterwards.
I fully agree on the sustainable, but I would like to emphasize the word rules. This is what is important. Today, we don't have rules. There are recommendations and that somebody can follow or not. If we want to have something which is really effective, we need something which shall be applied by everyone that will launch in the future satellites. And these rules in this definition is very important. It's the key element, I believe.
You want to add, Kumar?
Yeah, I think the Commission's scoping of space traffic management is fine in the communication which they put out, and it covers, I think, all of the areas which are necessary. And various bodies around the world have got their own definitions. Might be a political issue as to calling it management, space traffic management, as opposed to space traffic coordination between different UN states, but that's somebody else's problem. So in terms of the context of the question, it's right, and the ultimate intention is actually to succeed as an industry in growing it to this $1 trillion plus industry going forward. And in that domain, I think serve new sectors like in-orbit servicing, which many companies here, including GMB, are active in, and it'll be part of the solution. But probably the really missing piece is, I will say again, governments are too slow on this. They need to put in place regulations and policies which makes it incumbent on industry, okay, to do better.
Building a little bit, kind of pushing it back to our two representatives here. So there are a lot of solutions, and I mean, the definition remains ever so broad, even though it seems that Commission has done a very good job at encompassing everything. But how do we really align different, and let's just keep it to Europe, member states' policies and regulations when everyone is at such different stages of understanding and integrating STM, when we have companies that are playing it? Maybe either of you can expand a little bit on how you see better alignment in Europe, and maybe how that might be leadership for an international agreement on this.
Okay, so it's true that the member states, I mean, some don't have legislation, others have space laws. I think the most well-known one is the French laws. And so, of course, let's say you have that also in other sectors. Or you had this in other sectors. When the Commission started to regulate or legislate in the internal market, of course, we were legislating in areas where some member states did have legislations, others didn't have legislation, but that's exactly the purpose of legislating or the internal market, to establish a level playing field for everybody. That means, of course, that it means changes for those who perhaps don't have legislation. Those who have legislation, perhaps it doesn't affect them at all. But essentially, I mean, of course, we are discussing this internally at the moment, but the idea, or one of the reflections, is to say we should probably set out some minimum requirements that should be followed by everybody, and then of course some member states could decide that they want to go further, but at least there should be some minimum requirements that everybody should follow, because I think it's difficult to defend a position which is it's really an important topic, we need to do something. But of course, in the space area, we cannot regulate. You know, it doesn't somehow get together, these two elements.
Maybe Mark, you have something you want to say from Luxembourg's?
Yeah, no, it's a complicated thing, and I can agree with what Kumar said, is that there are processes that are very slow, and this is also a tricky part for the member states. I take the example here. We are member of the United Nations, we are part of COPUOS, we are member state of the European Union. You have various initiatives taken at various levels. And then, and we are confronted with a topic where, of course, it's delicate. Who will make the first step? How far will this first step go? And what is the impact then for this country maybe doing that, or maybe, I don't know, a continent doing it? And so it's a thin balance that you have to find. And of course, here as well, for an individual country, these topics are supposed to be discussed at international level. And so this is definitely something where Luxembourg is engaged. But on the other hand, are we nevertheless going then to regulate at national level? So I think it's not such an obvious answer to this question, but definitely I think that the initiative that has been taken at European Union level now, at least to create this dialogue between the member states and trying to align these views, I think this is definitely something we have to do. At international level, we may have much more leverage if we come as a Europe than individual countries.
Yes, and hopefully so. And building on that, maybe turning to industry representatives. So in light of harmonization and work being done at a European level, how do you envisage policy and regulations supporting you? What do you as industry need right now? And then also in the long term, in order for you to continue your operations to best service what you're doing in both the European and international market? And what would you like to tell Mark and Christoph here while you have them on your points?
Okay. Well, but first, I would like to finish with the previous, because I was analyzing the end of the previous discussion. The problem is not only to put in agreement the member states, it's to put in agreement the world. We need to agree with the US, with Chinese, with Russians. If we are, and not to jeopardize our industry because we are putting rules that others are not applying. This is something that I don't know how we will solve it. We can impose things to the Europeans, and then how we impose the same rules to Chinese or the Russians to avoid that they will provoke or will introduce more debris in the future. Not clear for me. Well, saying that, the second point is important. The rules and to define a regulatory framework in which we can consider and we can apply to this domain is important because we define the areas or lines of activity that will define the future from the industry. If we say that for example, we need to apply certain rules or operational concepts that need to cover activities to avoid problems in the future with the debris, is something that just after this, the industry can provide solutions adapted to the needs and the rules that the Commission or whoever will define. The same thing for activities. When we say we embrace this 5 years removal of the debris in space, then we can provide solutions that we can come from activities for in-orbit servicing, that elements that can go directly to the debris and to avoid to remove this element before the deadline. Then this technology needs to be developed, and we have some representatives doing this. Or we can define operational concept adapted to this activity, to this deadline that we can fix. And also we can define how we will eventually extend the lifespan of the satellites, applying different concepts for the control of the maneuvers that we need to apply to those satellites. Then it's obvious, everything that can help us in defining the rules, how we will play in this game, this will help to provide the solution, the right solution that we will need.
Okay, Carlos, I think you want to say something.
Yes. Well, I think it's kind of a law of nature. Technology always comes first, then regulations, right? So in a way, I think Europe here can lead by example, because we tend to think sometimes as regulations as something that is good, let's say, for the commons, but can kind of stop the industry for being more competitive if other players don't apply by the same rules. But look at the other way around. Actually, a recent paper by ESA put a collision avoidance maneuver as the cost of 25,000 euros, especially if it's an unnecessary one. So this actually is creating a dent on business. So if you have regulations, and certainly I'm biased here, but that kind of suggests the use of a space traffic management software that actually improves the competitiveness of the business, then you cannot have the best of both worlds. And I think here the Commission and other players can become institutional anchor customers for this type of solution and actually make the space industry in Europe more competitive than the rest of the world.
Okay, nice. Kumar, did you want to add anything on that?
I'm thinking carefully. I think what everybody wants is a successful global space industry in Europe, in the US, in Canada, Japan, China, India. And it's great that in Europe in particular, and the Commission should be commended for this, the importance of space in delivering solutions to the general public in many sectors, as well as to institutions and to governments, is sort of the degree of recognition across Europe has sort of shot up over the last 5 to 7 years. I think it's a great development, and that hopefully will continue. In practice, of these, whatever, 30,000 to 100,000 satellites which will be launched, they will be launched by less than 10 countries and by organizations in those 10 countries, most likely. Okay. And one particular company might actually, of their second generation, they want to launch 30,000 LEOs into some space below 600 kilometers altitude. And maybe 5 years ago, one would say that was not possible, but they delivered on what they said they were going to do for their first generation. So maybe it'll continue going forward. So this is what's happening. And the point is, I'm not going to propose specific regulatory solutions. The point is, if you don't, as governments and institutional bodies and space licensing entities, don't deal with this issue now, there's no point saying 10 years down the road when you've got all of these satellites and there's rushing around in an environment when you've got maybe 1 million small pieces of debris, some of which are going to probably remain lethal and non-trackable. And you can't dance around that in practice, no matter how good your SSA or STM is. You need to start thinking about finding regulatory solutions which will encourage industry to move. Now, the ASOA paper, which I refer to, actually, there's a lot of recommendations in there which ask governments, please, can you do this? Okay. There are other bodies like CONFER, Space Safety Coalition, who have got various best practice documents. But the FCC, I think, was a little bit, it was a little bit of a surprise to me that they actually went out with the 5-year rule, and we'll come back to that. But interesting question is, why won't other European states now follow the US's lead? Okay, I mean, some people have been grumbling that the US hasn't done anything, and now maybe the onus is on other European states to actually follow through, not necessarily exactly as what the US has done, but to take the initiative, because it'll be about 6 to 8 countries which will set the leadership on this. And the European Union as a whole and the individual states are going to be major players in that, and they should move at this point in time. And this is my plea to Christoph and to anybody here from European governments.
I think Christoph has a retort to that.
No, 2 points. The first one is how can we ensure that if we legislate, we don't put European industry at a disadvantage to other industries? And I think there are 2 elements to it. The first one is, as Carlos rightly said, okay, legislation is a cost, but it also brings benefits. So, but the second element, and perhaps more important for you, is and the Commission has said this overtly in the debate in the Parliament on STM, that one way to do that, and what we are looking at, is that if we legislate, then of course we would do it in such a way that if you're offering satellite services on EU territory, that you should fall under this legislation as well, no matter whether you are now a Chinese or an Australian satellite. If you offer services in Europe, you will have to follow this legislation. And this is not something that the EU has never done. In the service area, we have legislated in that way already in the past. So it's not something new. This is just one possibility. Yeah, stop there.
It works, yeah.
May I just comment on that point? Governments have, to a certain degree, a level of power. Okay, it's probably maybe not the right word, where they relate to a geography or a country or a set of countries where there's a significant market where space actors want to supply to, period. So the US at the FCC level already requires all non-US space operators who want to access the US market to effectively meet the FCC's requirements on space debris mitigation and orbit sustainability. And that FCC set of rules will change over time. The US has done it for ever since, I don't know, the 90s. Okay, so it's happening. Probably China will do something like that in some way or another for other reasons. But the second biggest market, or possibly even the biggest market in the world, is what is contained within the EU and the EEA. And I know that our various organizations have promoted the idea that if you want access to the European market for selling telecom services or some other services, government should look at the credentials of those operators in terms of how, when they license spectrum access or authorize spectrum access or did landing rights in the generic sense, they should also look at the credentials of how those companies are actually meeting various international or indeed European or nationally EU member state or European country state in the case of the UK, regulations in order to enable space safety and space sustainability. That can be done, okay, at a member state level. Okay, it doesn't necessarily need EU-wide coordination yet. It would be great if it was done at a harmonized or approximated basis across the different EU member states. So I worked for satellite operators for 30 years, okay? Satellite operators don't do things unless they're going to make money from it, or they are more or less required to do so by governments. And that's an interesting balance there. And this is the challenge for the industry, because everywhere I go into a conference, somebody somewhere in that room will say, oh, what about competitiveness? So my industry is going to be hurt. Are you going to affect? But you have to look at the common good here. And there is a commons out there, which is a shared resource, and we have to try to find a way, in the interest of all of us, to make that commons out there a common good, which we can all exploit and derive value from.
So it's quite interesting also, a few of you mentioned the FCC order, which, as we understand as well, will be assessed on a case-by-case basis, because there's no definitive stance that once a mission is complete, as I'm sure you're all aware, once a mission is complete, after 5 years, you have to deorbit the satellite. But the problem with that is there arise so many other questions on if you can't maneuver, what happens to your assets, how are you held responsible for it, not even before we start bringing insurance companies and everything else into it. So I suppose just to specify and hone in on that now, and given also the fact that you said it's a common space, we need to collaborate as an industry, how do you all interpret the FCC order? Do you think that the US's version is now going to be pressuring a little bit European countries to start adopting something similar? Do you feel like it helps you with the work that you're doing in the EU level, or does the industry feel it's too ambitious? Does it make it hard for you, or does it actually help you to continue your operations? I'm going to give the floor to whoever wants to comment on the FCC's order. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I don't know if 5 years is the right number. Before that was 25. The previous rule was 25. Probably 25 is too much. 25 years on an object, a dangerous object, which is without control flying, is well, we can see as a real problem, and is something that we need to avoid. But in any case, we need a solution in this way. We need to have the compromise to remove the objects without control. Of course, there are elements which are coming from because there is a separation which is not well done, and we are missing something in the space. Well, this is a different thing, but we cannot leave satellites without control in space. Then how we can fix this problem? Then we need to define a timeline on which we need to consider that the satellite or the elements shall be flying. After this, we need to remove it. How we will remove it? Well, we need to maintain enough fuel for the maneuvers, or we are sending a cargo which is taking the element and going to the atmosphere. But it's something that needs to be applied, and it should be part probably on the new rules or new space law, whatever that we will define in Europe, or we will define worldwide, because this is something that I believe is really needed.
I just want to add, I agree with Miguel. I'm certainly not commenting if it's 5 or 25, but I just want to add that it's certainly good for space sustainability, but it also opens new business opportunities, because to do all of that, probably you'll need some AI ML tool that helps to do the correct maneuver. And we certainly have an interest in providing that tool. So when there's regulation in place, first there is clarity, which is good. And then it opens new business opportunities, because like you're saying, there's new needs that have to be addressed, and certainly people are obliged to do it, and they will look for the best tool on the market. And certainly we want to be a player on that quest.
So from my colleague Charity, who heads up Astroscale's global policy team, is sitting here, so I'll be very careful. I think as a company, we support the 5-year position, which the FCC has now put in its report and order. There is always going to be somebody in the US who's going to be grumbling about this. This is always the case in any regulatory proceeding. But if you actually look at the FCC's rule, it's actually not quite 5 years. It is 5 years from the time at which your ability to do conjunction avoidance maneuvers stops. So that might be some time after your spacecraft payload has actually stopped working and you stop generating revenue. So as long as you have the ability to do collision avoidance, the start of the 5-year period doesn't start, okay? And the second thing is they've done a grandfathering period, so I think these rules will generally tend to apply to systems which launch after late 2024. We actually think that the FCC should do more, but that's a separate process which is ongoing in the US. And they've implied in their rulemaking that they will consider other issues relating to this overall topic. Yeah, we've asked a number of European governments, what are you going to do? Okay, because at least somebody on the other side of the fence, so actually a lot of the rest of the world was grumbling about the US, not putting its sort of house in order. I would say that the US has done a great leadership step in this regard, and they should be commended for taking this leadership position. So in the UK, for example, the government announced in June, we want to take as a UK a leadership position in this, in the international story. We've asked the government, what are you doing? Okay.
I will not comment directly on the order and whether 5 years is now the correct number of years. But what is interesting is firstly that visibly the FCC considered that the topic is so urgent that the 25 years is outdated and we need something which is more in tune with the current situation in space. And secondly, visibly, they also consider that guidelines and recommendations is not enough. We need something legally binding. And I think that's very interesting, these two aspects.
Well, with an eye also on the time, I want to be able to take some audience questions. If anybody has any, just raise their hand. And then please state your name and who you're representing.
Augusto Carmaño, CENER. I have the impression that we are in a situation like in the ocean. There is an interesting documentary from the BBC, which is a plastic ocean, quantifying how much plastic we have in the ocean. And the plastic in the ocean is much closer to take it out, but nobody does. And with the debris, I got the impression we are in the same situation. Removing debris is tremendously expensive. In 2016, ESA proposed to the member states a mission called ED Orbit, which was not subscribed because nobody wanted to pay for that mission. Then in 2019, they did a small mission, which was approved, which was EDRIOS, for a debris removal experiment. But in the ESA programs, nobody is really pushing for mission to clean up space. So my recommendation would be that in the context of this new regulatory environment, everybody should pay a tax for circulating in space, and this tax might accumulate and pay the service of debris removal.
I see some audience reactions. Any panel reactions to this suggestion?
Not on the tax issue, because I'll probably get shocked by somebody in this room for offering a view on that. But actually, there are government agencies around the world doing things. In Japan, JAXA, plus support from other government ministries, have a CRD2 program where the second stage of it, the first stage, a satellite or spacecraft which Astroscale will launch, will go and inspect H2 upper stage. The second stage of that JAXA program is a competition, and the intention then is actually to go capture that H2 upper stage, which is a big rocket, and bring it down. And that is intended to happen in the next 3 years, or around that time frame. In Europe, ESA, to be fair, have the ADRIOS program. They have supported the project of ClearSpace, which is funded, and that is to demonstrate robotic capture capability by around 2025, 2026, according to what I understand the schedules to be. And it is supported by the ESA member states, or some of these, and it's an ESA institutional program. ESA separately has, under the artist budget, and Elodie Viau was here earlier, they have another program under the Sunrise program, which is with OneWeb, and we are a party, or one of the parties involved in part of the Sunrise program, which is actually to develop a services spacecraft, a LEO, which would be able to go and remove from orbit a failed LEO satellite of a constellation operator, assuming certain technical conditions are met. And we will be launching that as Astroscale towards the end of 2024. That's the current timeline. And that removal mission should happen in 2025. In the US, there are other projects, and there are various other companies in Europe which have actually working on EU programs and other ESA programs, which are actually working in the technology. And it's absolutely vital that the EU member states and the EU institutions continue to support these activities going forward. And Christoph has indicated that that's part of the 4 or 5 main elements. And whether it is done as an EU program or as an ESA program, that's a debate for those 2 institutional bodies. But the importance of supporting the industry in developing these solutions is vital. And in the US, I think the US is also doing a lot more in this area. They're passing legislation to enable public funding bodies to support the development of technology in this area. So these parts of the world, North America, Europe, parts of Europe, and Far East, they're doing stuff. It's not that nobody's doing anything. Okay.
Sorry, just, of course, the best debris is the one that never is created. So on debris prevention and debris mitigation, I think we should put a lot of focus. And then there is also some people are saying that we should follow a zero net policy, meaning that if you bring 100 kilo in space, you're responsible to bring 100 kilo back. Of course, where the thing gets tricky, if you're not able to bring 100 kilo back, but only 90 kilos, what do you do? Are you then required to bring back the debris of someone else to get to your 100 kilo? But so, I mean, it's an interesting issue that people are debating there. Thank you.
Carlos,
I
did you want to
just
add?
want to add very briefly that I fully agree with Christopher. Of course, it's important to remove debris, but it's also important to not cause more. And I think the business model for not causing more is more clear because everyone wants to safeguard their assets, while the business model for removing, it's not so clear. I'm certainly rooting, and I think everyone, for Astroscale and other companies to become successful. But there, I think other more creativity, let's say, measures and business models still need to be defined.
And final thing. It's true, it's important not to create the ability to remove, but don't forget that we have debris already flying, and we need to improve our capabilities today to do this observation. We don't need to stop the development of technology to improve our knowledge of what we have today. We need to improve the number of objects that we can identify, the accuracy of this, and this will improve at least our current situation. Of course, for the future, if we can remove it, it will be much better. The taxes, I don't believe the party would like to do it, but we will see.
Maybe one last question from the audience, and I think I'm already pushing my luck on the time. And then it was to the young woman in the back. Yeah.
Thank you for this discussion. I'm Lucy and I work at the European Defence Agency in space policy. And I had more of a legal question for you, Christophe. You mentioned that for this STM legislation that you're considering several various legal bases. I can imagine that you're considering Article 189, but I was wondering what other legal basis you're considering.
So, okay. So it might surprise you, but we are not specifically looking at 189. But there are other interesting legal bases like the internal market, environmental legislation, transport articles in the treaty. And interesting is in particular the single market legislation. Because I know there are, in particular, I mean, there are many people who say, but you cannot legislate. There is 189 which says you cannot harmonize. So how can you legislate? However, the union has shown that even in areas where the treaty says in one policy area you cannot harmonize, that there are, depending on the focus you put into the legislation, you can use another article in the treaty. And I'm referring here in particular, for those who like this sort of argument, tobacco advertising legislation. According to the treaty, we cannot harmonize in the health area. Nevertheless, there exists directive on tobacco advertising, which is based on the single market article. So just a thought.
Okay, and just one last question, if you'd like to go ahead with yours. Can we?
So Steve Parks from Star Dundee. It's not really a question, just a comment. So when you gave your charts about the debris, I was interested to think, well, you said about 1 gram traveling at 7 kilometers per second. And I thought, what does that actually mean when it hits a spacecraft? So if you convert that into kinetic energy, then that's around about 25 megajoules. Okay, so what's 25 megajoules? Well, that's actually 25 sticks of dynamite. So when this tiny piece of metal, which is say half the size of a euro cent hits your spacecraft, then you've got 25 sticks of dynamite going off. Thank you.
No, everyone loves a good fun fact. I mean, not so fun, but an interesting fact. All right, and before I hand back over to Dan, I think as a closing remark, short, sweet, what, for each of you, what is the single most important measure to be taken on STM? Now, I know we have a lot to choose from, but I'm asking you to choose one single most important measure to be taken on STM. Maybe I'm going to go in order. Christoph, you want to go ahead?
I think anybody who operates a satellite should be obliged to have an an SST service or an SST-like service, or subscribe to such a service.
All right, an SST service. Mark.
Well, I find the question extremely complicated. And I think there are so many things to do. Probably or that's at least what we will try to do now, is to look much more in details on what we can do on regulatory aspects. So it's not one single measure that we may take, but certainly what we will do is try to accelerate the process, as Kumar highlighted.
Right. Miguel.
What I was saying before, to have a successful STM process, we need to improve the current technology that we have today in place. It's clear.
Carlos.
Well, I totally second Christopher's suggestion, and I suggest Europe leads by example by putting that into place.
Kumar.
Probably two things. And if you just contain it in Europe, the major spacefaring nations who authorize space systems can hopefully move faster. And secondly, please continue to support the in-orbit servicing industry in Europe in all its domains, from space situational awareness to in-orbit servicing, end-of-life debris removal, and also later down the road in-orbit manufacturing and other growth areas which are very important to the industry.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me. And I think they deserve a round of applause for a very topical debate.
So thank you very much to all of our panelists. And again, thank you to Leah for leading that discussion. And I think, yeah, really interesting discussion. So thank you all very much. So that's it for the panels at this year's event. But don't go anywhere, because we're not quite finished yet. Because we now are delighted to turn to the ceremony for the European Space Policy Awards 2022. And we're going to be crowning the winners of the Innovation in Space and the Sustainability in Space Awards. So to help us present the awards, I'm delighted to now invite to the stage two of the judges from our judging panel. That's Geraldine Naja, a Director of Commercialization, Industry and Procurement from ESA, and Guillaume de la Brosse, Head of Unit for Space, Innovation, Startups and Economics in DG DEFIS at the European Commission. So if I could ask Geraldine and Guillaume to come and join me on the stage here. Thank you very much. So as I mentioned at the start of the day yesterday, the process of picking the winners for these awards actually started back in the spring, when we asked for nominations to be put forward in each category. And from those nominations, we've shortlisted finalists for each category, and you can see their logos on the screen here now. So we can see for the Innovation in Space Award, we have HiSide, Inmarsat, and Lunar Cargo. And for the Sustainability in Space Award, we have Astroscale, Impulsion, Okapi, and Numocell. And all of these companies, really, I think we should say, have done amazingly well already by getting this far. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I think really they should all consider themselves as winners already. So I'd like to start, please, by asking everyone to give a big round of applause to all our finalists. So we actually have 5 judges who've sat on the panel to select the winners for each category here. So we have Geraldine and Guillaume, as I mentioned, and we also have Artie Holler from Dassault, Olivier Lemaitre from Eurospace, and then the final judge is all of you out there. Because the 5th vote is taken from a public vote that's been available to all of you, all the attendees here in person, all the attendees online to be part of. So if you haven't voted already, you do have still one final chance to do that. And you can see on the screen here, you need to go to the URL www.sly.do, and then you can enter the code EU Space 2022, and that will enable you to vote for your favorites. So we're going to give you one last chance to vote, as I say. And whilst you do that, we wanted to, one final time, show you the information and details for all our finalists by showing a short summary video. So first of all, I'd like to introduce our finalists in the Innovation in Space Award.
IRIS specifically tracks in 4 dimensions, so latitude, longitude, and altitude, but also time. These are the so-called 4D trajectory-based operations that air traffic controllers and pilots can use to calculate the optimal routing from one place to another, optimal cruise, as well as optimal descent and ascent from airports that result in overall CO2 emissions reductions.
The Moon can provide resources for deep space exploration and clean energy on Earth. But to unlock this potential, we need to land equipment and supplies on the lunar surface. The problem is that current landers are prohibitively expensive. The solution is lunar cargo. Our patent-pending technology uses 2 elegant mechanical solutions that do not need a single drop of fuel for the landing phase, and so we can be 70% cheaper in comparison to propulsion-based landers.
HiSide has developed the next generation of integrated technologies for the high-speed processing, storage, and transfer of large amounts of satellite data, with the objective of remarkably improving the speed and efficiency of onboard data management and transfer to ground. HiSide's main innovation is the demonstration of a complete data chain architecture to handle an aggregate instrument data rate of at least 50 gigabits per second in the near term, together with a roadmap to achieve performance greater than 100 gigabits per second in the future.
So there was our finalists for the Innovation in Space Award, and then I'd like to now do the same and show you the final video for the Sustainability in Space Award finalists. So we can now run that video.
Hello, I'm Nick Shave, Managing Director at Astroscale UK and Europe, where I lead a team of dedicated space sweepers who are developing the in-orbit servicing market. We're developing new innovations across space technology, commercial services, and supporting policy developments, which will help create a sustainable space economy and to mitigate the growing and hazardous buildup of debris in space.
So Impulsion is contributing to the topic of sustainability in space by providing mobility in space. And mobility is at the very center of sustainability. At the very center of avoiding debris in orbit is making sure that everything that is currently in space is maneuverable.
To increase space situational awareness, we took over 30 years of research work into our scientific core and fused them with artificial intelligence methods and state-of-the-art computer science to produce a holistic overview of our orbits and predict space assets behavior precisely.
Combination of an inflatable structure covered by loose regolith and mirror membranes leads to a solution that features the lowest payload mass of all concepts.
So that's all our finalists. And once again, I'd like to ask everyone to give a round of applause to finalists in both categories. And that was also your final opportunity to vote, because I can now announce that voting is closed. So whilst we tot up the scores and find out who has won, we're delighted to actually be joined by a representative from last year's winner of the Innovation in Space Award. So last year, IBOS were the winners for the award, and it's great to have with us joining virtually Thomas Shervan from IBOS, who's here today. So Thomas, welcome. Congratulations, first of all, again on winning the award last year. Yeah, just whilst I maybe head to the room and tot up the scores for this year, I wondered if you could give us a brief overview of what winning the award meant to you, and maybe tell us a little bit about IBOS's journey in the year since then. So Thomas, look forward to hearing from you.
Hello. So hello, thank you for the introduction. Yes, it's my pleasure to be here and to talk about and tell you about our experiences in the last year. And first of all, our technology was the ISSI Intelligent Space System Interface. And in the next slide, I just wanted to tell you something about it. So first of all, the Innovation in Space Award was a great opportunity for us and a great chance for us. We got a lot of visibility. And also actively, a lot of people approached us on conferences, on LinkedIn, and congratulated us to this award. And it was a very good, let's say, marketing issue also for us, and also a good opportunity to share our idea and our concept of this future space infrastructure we are envisioning. And last but not least, we got also a cool award, which we can present and put in the shelf and show everybody. So I carried it around some weeks, but then it got a little bit heavy. But now it's always nice to have it and to show it to visitors. But now you maybe are thinking, what is this technology I'm talking about? What is the ISSI? And after again, thank you for the Space EU Space Forum Award, I would like to show you a little bit about the tech. Next slide, please. So we are addressing all these ideas you see here of on-orbit servicing, on-orbit assembly, all the ideas of OSAM and ESAM. Next slide, please. And our approach is that we want to create the USB for space to allow others to do LEGO in space. So to assemble, disassemble, let's say upgrade and repair satellites in space in a modular way. Next slide, please. And for this, we came up with this connector or interface. It's a multifunctional connector. It's palm size. And this is the USB for space to do LEGO in space. So we allow modules in space to be coupled together mechanically. We transfer data and power, and this allows a lot of new concepts and new approaches for future spacecraft. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of it, some impression of the real hardware. We had also video of it, but we cannot show it here because we could only show PDFs in this presentation. The file was too big. But if you go to YouTube and you just putting in IBOS space, you will find a lot of interesting videos showing our technology, how it works, and how it's demonstrated in different robotic scenarios. Next slide, please. Here you have some impression from our demonstrations, and you have to understand that this robotic demonstration where we just move these modules around is back in 2017, and the whole project started, the IBOS project started back in 2010. Next slide, please. Here also some current projects we're working on, or some currently past projects we are working on. It's about walking robots, and we teamed up with a lot of partners from industry, from research, which are using our interface for robotic manipulation or for walking robots, which then later can crawl over satellites and space stations in space. Next slide, please. One of our biggest achievements was right after the winning we received the award. We were in a project together with SkyCorp in US, and we launched our interface in a ISSI flight qualification experiment this year in March. And till then, we are demonstrating data transfer, power transfer, coupling, decoupling, and we are up there on the International Space Station on the Kibo balcony on the IC platform until December this year. And then we receive the interface is back, and we can analyze and take a look at this space flown hardware. So next slide, please. Now, it was only a brief idea, and again, I want to thank the European Space Forum for this opportunity and our award last year. And I wish the best of all and the success to the this year Innovation Space Award winner 2022. And I hope they will get as much traction and as much visibility as we received it by this award. So thank you again for your for letting me speak and tell you something about our idea. And I wish you a pleasant forum and a pleasant afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thomas, thank you very much for that, and it's great to see the work that you're doing and the progress that you're making. And really appreciate you being with us today to do that and to pass the baton on, so to speak. So thank you very much again. So now it's time that we're actually going to announce the winners of this year's category. So we're going to start off with the winner of the Innovation in Space Awards. So as we said before, the 3 finalists we have here are HiSide, Inmarsat, and Lunar Cargo. So maybe Guillaume, if I could invite you to come to the lectern and announce who our winner is. And I think Caroline is going to come up with the award.
Thank you very much. What a privilege. So I have the right to open the envelope now. Right. So the winner is, it's a bit like the ceremony des Oscars, so basically. So the winner is HiSide. Congratulations. That's yours. Thanks very much and congratulations.
So we have Robin and Steve here from HiSide. So Guillaume, I'm not sure if there's anything you wanted to say quickly.
No, I'd like very much to congratulate you for what you've done and for that prize. I think we've heard about Thomas what it means, attraction and visibility. So we are very happy that you're the winner. I'm happy because actually I scored you very high. So I'm very happy. I mean, basically the technology that you're developing is very impactful and very transversal. So we consider that it can have the most impact on space as a whole. Lots of application, Earth observation, telecommunications. It's about high-speed management, handling, and storage of data. Your consortium is very solid. You've gone through feasibility studies, so congratulations. I think you have a big avenue in front of you. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Steve, Robin, I don't know if either of you wanted to say a few words or...
Yes, if I may. We've left the best till last, and so we appreciate you all being here and staying on for the award ceremony. So thank you for being the best and being the last here. So yes, thanks very much for a great conference. Being a technology person, this was real eye-opener for me, and I can see and appreciate all the hard work that that goes into actually sorting out the policies that eventually trickle down to give me the money that I need to do the things that I enjoy doing. So thanks very much. I would like to thank the various project partners. To keep it short, I won't go through the list of the project partners because there are a large number. I think the greatest thing about actually working on this project, which was developing high-speed payload data handling chain for use on board spacecraft, was actually working with a team of world-leading experts from across Europe to create this technology that we've got, which we believe is really world-leading technology. And it's that collaboration across Europe which was really the fantastic achievement with the project, especially through the COVID years. So I'd also please like to thank very much the European Commission for conceiving the Horizon 2020 project and then allowing the UK to be part of that still. And so, yeah, thank you very much, European Commission. The Horizon 2020 project was a great enabler for us and our team. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Steve, and congratulations again to Steve, Robin, and the rest of the team. So congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you, Guillaume, as well. Thank you. So next up, I would like to invite Geraldine to come to the podium and announce the winner for the Sustainability in Space Award. Just a reminder again of the four finalists in this category: it's Astroscale, Impulsion, Okapi, and Numacell. So Geraldine, over to you.
Thank you, Dan. And yes, I think it's a very good thing to have next to innovation sustainability, because it's a very important factor for space tomorrow. And also the fact that the four, let's say, finalists are so different, ranging from in-orbit services to mobility in space to SSA and even manned exploration sustainability, shows the dimension of the subject. So now, and the winner is Astroscale.
I think we have Kumar with us to come up and collect the award. Yes, and Charity as well, I think we have as well, if you'd like to come and join us too. So Geraldine, I'm not sure if you wanted to say a few words again. Oh, picture first, sorry.
I'm very happy for you. I know you well, and I really appreciate. I think you have a very ingenious and very simple but very ingenious solution to let's say in-orbit services, and it can cover many subjects. I mentioned earlier today that I do believe in-orbit services are the new big market for space, and you can cover with your very simple but extremely efficient solution, maneuvering, let's say, end-of-life services, debris removal, refueling. So you have so many dimensions also to the issue that I'm very happy for you, and I congratulate you.
So Kumar and Charity, I don't know if one of you wanted to say a few words?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'll pass it on to Kumar as well. But one thing on my mind is this is a big, challenging problem we have, but we have the innovators and the idea generators and the policymakers to help solve the problem. It is not insurmountable. It will take good space situation awareness, good space traffic management, and yes, space environment management. Hand it over to Kumar. Thank you.
So I'm sure everybody would like to leave and get home early. Just like to thank Forum Europe for the opportunity to submit ourselves for award. Thank you, Geraldine, for your very kind comments. And I'd also, from the European side of Astroscale, like to thank all of our partners in Europe who have worked with us both on the LCD mission operations in Europe and actually around the world. Our other partners who are working with us on the ELSA-M project, which is actually a great PPP partnership with ESA. And thank you very much to ESA and the UK Space Agency for that. I'd like to say thanks to our fellow awardees who should actually probably have also got an award because I think they're great projects. And hopefully you will resubmit next year and one of you will win next year. And thank you again for this. It's a great honor and it was quite unexpected. Thank you.
So thank you again. Thank you. Congratulations again to Charity, to Kumar, everyone at Astroscale. Of course, all of our finalists. And as we said before, I think really you should all consider yourself winners. So in a second, we're going to ask all of our finalists to join us up on stage for a final photograph with our judges here as well. But before we did that, and I don't know why I'm holding this microphone. Before we do that, I think this one's not working. Perfect. I'd just like to maybe close the conference with a few thank yous to some of the key people who've been involved. So first of all, I'd like to once again say a huge thank you to all of our sponsor and partner organizations who've been involved in the organization of this event. Really do appreciate the support of each and every one of you. You can see, those of you in the room can see their logos on the screen, on the banner, I should say, behind me here. Really do appreciate the support in each and every one of those. So thank you very much. Of course, a huge thank you to all of our speakers and panelists. I think we had 9 or 10 sessions, I think it was, over the course of the last 2 days. Really, really interesting discussions, and we do really appreciate everyone's involvement, the time that it takes to prepare for the contributions beforehand, and of course, the time to be here and the discussions that we had as well. So thank you very much to all of our speakers and panelists. Thank you to all of our attendees. Thank you to everyone here, particularly those of you who've stayed here with us to the end of what's been, as I said, an interesting 2 days, but it has been a long 2 days as well. So we really appreciate all of you staying with us here and everyone else who's joined us here in Brussels. And of course, to those of you who are joining us online and have been submitting questions, submitting comments and things, and been a big part of the event virtually as well. And we very much hope that many of you who've participated virtually this year will be able to join us here in person for next year's event as well. And finally, I'd like to leave the last thank you to my team at Forum Europe. So the guys behind the scenes and those of you here as well who've been working and running the event, it does take a huge amount of effort to put together an event like this, particularly when it's a hybrid format, and the team has ever done a fantastic job. So a big thank you to Carolina, to Becca, to Beth, to Hannah, to Taya and Annalise. So that's about it. So thank you all so much again for your participation. We do plan to have this event again next year, so I'm sure we'll be in touch with you all and look forward to hopefully seeing you again then, if not before. But for now, wishing everyone a very safe journey home, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.